Well, hello everybody. Welcome to Aquarius Rising Africa. And it's Marvelous Monday. And I hope you've all had a fantastic weekend. And I hope you have a beautiful week ahead of you because this is why we have cool guests on a Monday. Why?
Yeah,
Because we start our week off well, don't we?
always.
Indeed. Welcome, beautiful Brice. How are you?
I was saying off stage, off camera, I missed you guys. I'm so happy to be back and to be.
Yes.
I mean, we were chit chatting off camera about all this stuff, and it's like it's just so fun to have friends that you can actually like speak the God's honest truth about the craziness that is in the world and like the wild shit you're finding in your own research. And it's very, very, very cathartic to have people that actually get that, and can. So I'm so happy
Yeah, and
to
when
have you guys.
and you think your shit can get wilder, and then shit just gets even wilder. It's like you thought you already reached the point that suddenly there's even more shit. So yes, we need Brice on mysterious Mondays.
I'm just a nosy person, so I love doing these deep dives to like pick it. And I feel like because these people, most of them aren't alive anymore, it's like fair game because they're not here anymore. So we can like be a little nosy, and then you find stuff and you're like, what the hell actually happened? Because shit's not adding up. These dots are not connecting at all versus what they told us. I know we're talking about Mata Hari today, and I know you guys already, Ashanti, you are already familiar with this fascinating tragic
Yeah.
woman. But I said something, and I thought I would start it with this. What's really super fascinating, besides just her tragic life, you guys, is that she was executed in 1917. We're going to get to that. Her head is missing, y'all. Her head is missing. There's her head. And we'll talk about her story and like who she became and like what happened to her in her life. Because I know she fascinates a lot of people. There's been a lot of miniseries done about her, a lot of documentaries done about her. But if you guys know from like a couple of years ago on my channel, I was diving into these like historical figures we don't know where their heads are. And I had said something, I was telling you guys, I'd said something to my boyfriend. I was like, how do you lose a freaking, because her head was sent to a museum in Paris. And in the year 2000, they realized it was missing. And I was like, how the F do you like manage to lose a freaking head, like of somebody of this historical value? And he was like, oh, well, they use heads all the time for these rituals. And we started talking about that. So I kind of want people to kind of start knowing that before we get to her story, because her story is so freaking tragic. You can definitely tell there was probably things happening behind the scenes that pushed her story. I feel like she was such a victim of her own life in a time when women really, I mean, we're talking about the early 20th century. So there's a lot going on in the world at this time, and women still didn't have as many rights to their own children, even, which we'll get into that. And so she was kind of pushed into this world. And for those who don't know who Mata Hari was, she was considered, I heard people say she was considered the Madonna of her day. She's also considered to be the person who invented striptease.
Femme fatale. She's the femme fatale, original femme fatale. Exactly. She had this absolute, shall we call it a like for military boys.
Yes, and that's what got her into trouble because she got accused of espionage, of being a spy. And at this point, most people are leading, and we'll get into that. Some of the documents got released from her trial recently, and people are kind of like, was she a spy or was she just pillow talking with these men and really didn't have? But if we're looking at it from the fact that her head's missing now, was her death intentional? Like what, there's just a lot of questions I have knowing what we know now. And again, as common sense would listen, if I was working at a museum and they had Mata Hari's head in storage at this museum, I would think that would be a primary object artifact to make sure it was probably locked up and embalmed quite frequently to make sure. And then to find out it's freaking missing, like we can't just say,
exactly.
uh-oh,
Exactly.
we lost her head.
Exactly.
Like her head's not missing. It's missing from us, but I think people know exactly where her head is. And so that just makes her life even more interesting. And we don't want to, I always say I don't want to assume too much without evidence, but just her situation, you guys, like when I first started studying Mata Hari, like her story really affected me, as a woman and as a human being, because I just felt like she was such a victim of her circumstances, if that makes sense, and really had no control over what was happening to her. And again, there's been many series done on this woman. Many people have done movies about her because she is so fascinating. And recently there was, and I can't remember what it's called. I think you can find it on YouTube. They a Russia production company did like a whole big like mini series over her life. And I watched it. It's dubbed in English, and of course, when they dub it, it looks weird because the lips aren't matching the words, but it's still really, really good. And I ended up watching some of the actors being interviewed who played these parts. So I want to see, I understand actors have to do a lot of studying into the people they're playing, especially playing an historical person. So I kind of wanted to see what their perspective was on her. And one of the actors said something that I thought was so fascinating, and it's probably why we as a community, as people, get fascinated by these particular people like Mata Hari. He said, when someone who is exceeding at something so well, there is always a mystery. Because even though she became a stripper, or, we'll get into what she did it really well. And this was at the point, you guys, where the Moulin Rouge was being there. It wasn't like she was just this oddity of burlesque dancers. No, this was very common at this time. Again, the Moulin Rouge was being built at this point, especially in Paris, where she ended up. This burlesque dancers were a dime a dozen. So the fact that she rose to the top of this industry and did it so well, played this part of Mata Hari, because it's not a real name, so well, is what I think intrigues people. Like, who really was this woman? Who was she really? And so we're going to talk about her today because, Lord have mercy. And I've noticed, you guys, I've tried to put off my glasses for a while, but it's a lot easier reading. You can actually see the words. All my own videos have way less bloopers when I can actually see what I'm reading.
Oh, don't worry. I think I'll be joining you soon with mine. So maybe next week we'll both wear our glasses.
Oh, all right. Well, okay. So Mata Hari, again, just so you guys know, she was considered the Madonna of her day and the inventor of the striptease. She was born Margarita Zell on the 7th of August, 1876 in Leeuwarden, Netherlands. So she was born in the Netherlands. Her parents, she was born into a pretty wealthy family at this point, but it was like new money, right? And so what happens a lot with new money is that overspending tends to happen, right? Like we say that down. You think of like the Great Gatsby, like, this is a huge concept. Old money tends to be a little bit quieter than new money. And so her father, a man named Adam. Now, what we get with her father too, which is really fascinating, is that he was notoriously known to exaggerate his own life story. Like, he would lie about his life story. He would tell these crazy. So when we get to Mata Hari, or Margarita, her real name, she creates her own stories too, which I think for her, though, was more about the mystique of Mata Hari. All right, so he owned a hat shop and made a fortune investing in oil companies. Because of this, the family lived a very lavish lifestyle that allowed the children to go to very exclusive schools until Mata Hari, I'm just going to call her Mata Hari just so we don't get confused, was 13 years old. Now, her father, because he overspent, he ended up going bankrupt in 1889. Around this time, her father, too, I ended up having some mistresses and left her mother and her children. Now, at this point, of course, in modern times, if a man decides he's going to leave his family and go marry his mistress, in most Western countries or modern countries, then of course there's alimony and child support, but that's not the same in the late 1800s, right? So when her father left, and I see this, I kind of wrote in my notes, like, this kind of shows some, obviously, the developing of some boy called daddy issues, some trauma around the abandonment of her father. So her mother ended up dying in 1891. And so Marta Matahari was sent to live with aunts and uncles. She went to go study to be a kindergarten teacher. And this pisses me off so much, guys, because so many of the accounts you read about her situation when she was studying to be a kindergarten teacher says she had an affair with the headmaster. No, you guys. She was groomed and she was abused by the headmaster. Let's get this straight. A 16-year-old cannot consent to a 40-year-old man. Like, let's call a spade a spade. Matahari was not out there seducing a damn 40-year-old at 16. This was a grooming situation where she was raped. Let's just, but because
absolutely. I wanted to say that. I wanted to say, you know, when you know, this whole thing that she was having an affair with her headmaster. I mean, we know full well that does not happen. So obviously he was a groomer, having his way with her for whatever reasons, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, what happened was when this affair, this rape came out, she took the blame. At 16 years old, she was the one that took the blame. She was kicked out of the school. The headmaster got no punishment, nothing. She was the one that was the problem. And so she got expelled from the school. So at this point, she is only 16 years old. Her father's left the family, remarried, and her mother has passed away. So she's relying on the kindness of extended family members like aunts and uncles. So by 18, here she was, no education, no hope for an education, because now she has this scarlet letter on her because of this predator that she ran into. And so she sees this advertisements in the newspaper, and I guess this was common at this point, where a lot of the Dutch military men who were seeking wives would put advertisements, you know, we think about the mail order bride situation for a wife in the local newspapers. And so at 18, she responded to one of these guys, the Dutch. Now he lives in the West Indies. So this is where she starts to get introduced to where she gets her name Matahari, where she lives. She ends up marrying this guy. Now this guy was a lot older than her. And I'm not saying that that's necessarily a bad thing. My boyfriend's 11 years older than me. Like, I'm not saying that that's the wrong. You're just taking a very young girl who's already been through trauma, and now she's married to a way older man who is abusive. All right. So it was known that he was physically abusive. Now, this man she married was a man in high standing in the Dutch military. So this was Dutch army captain by the name of Rudolph McLeod. Again, he was living in the Dutch East Indies, which is now Indonesia. So they married on the 11th of July, 1895. Because of his status, Matahari was now a part of the Dutch upper class. Well, I don't know about you guys. So her husband is 20 years older than her. So like 38, 39, 40. She's 18, 19, 20. There's a huge difference between an 18, 19, 20-year-old in maturity and a 40-year-old, right? And so she is mesmerized by this new culture. This is exciting for her. So at this point, we do see historically, even though she wasn't stripping at this point, she was part of the Dutch upper class. She was going and studying a lot of the different dancing styles of the Indonesian people, which is a beautiful dancing style. So I want to make that clear. Like, I don't want to disrespect the heritage of the Indonesian people, because she is going to take this dancing style and morph it into a striptease that she's going to do later. But when we see it in Indonesia, it's not raunchy. It's not sexually, there's not a lot of, it's just a culture. And you have to think about it too, guys, like for the Europeans, which, you know, the white people over in Europe and America, around this time, getting into the Victorian age, we're seeing women and men very tightly dressed, right? Like covering their whole bodies. You're going to get to Indonesia, where it's very hot, and obviously culturally people didn't cover themselves. Same in India with the local dress, right? They're not. So to see that much skin too must have been a shock to her to be from the Netherlands in this 19th century, where, you know, the Victorian age, the very conservative age of dress, if that makes sense. So you had to kind of put yourself in her shoes. You know, if I'm this 18, 19, 20-year-old girl, I finally think I've secured my place in society after going through all this trauma. I'm now in Indonesia. At first, this must have felt like a huge adventure, right? You're seeing a way different part of the world. And then come to find out this new older man you married is going to start beating the shit out of you, basically, is what happened. She was very, very much abused. Now, they ended up having 2 children. The boy was born in 1897 and the girl was born in 1898. Now, Mike, the husband, McLeod, he not only was abusive, but openly kept concubines. So, you know, I don't know. I would say, like, as far as the keeping of a concubine, probably did not upset Mata Hari, because I don't think that was a love relationship. You know, I don't think that she was in love with him. I think he was her ticket. But because he openly kept concubines, he contracted syphilis. And that syphilis was passed down to the children. Okay. So again, put yourself in her position. She's a very young girl. She's been abused before. She's now in this situation. She's a mother and her children are very sick because of syphilis that they contracted from their mother through their father, who is keeping a concubine. Right? Now, at that time, so the son ended up passing away in 1899. So he was born in 1897. And again, he passed away in 1899. So he only lived to like the age of 2. At this point, it was said that the natives poisoned the children. But again, that was just the propaganda. We know from letters that Mata Hari wrote back to her friends in the Netherlands that it was syphilis. And it will end up, just to give you guys a heads up, the daughter will not live that long either. She ends up dying later on, but as a young adult, a teenager. But she also, her death was caused by syphilis complications from her father. So if you guys think about that, like that's a lot of concubines. That's a lot of abuse. That's real heavy stuff to have to deal with at her age. All right. So again, to distract her from her awful marriage, she studied the culture intensely for months and even joined a local drama company where she was given the name Mata Hari, which means Eye of the Day. All right. So soon after the son died, they moved back to the Netherlands and they officially separated on August 30th, 1902. At this point, too, even though there were propaganda rumors that the natives had poisoned the kids, but we know again from her letters that it was syphilis, the father, her husband, her ex-husband now, is also blaming Mata Hari now for it's not his fault that the kids got syphilis. It's her fault. She's the bad guy. You guys see this, like, she's constantly the scapegoat, this woman. She's constantly the scapegoat. She will continue to be the scapegoat for the duration of her life. All right, so Mata Hari was, though, given custody for a little while. The ex-husband was ordered to pay child support, but he never did. Now, again, this is a high-ranking Dutch officer who has the courts wrapped around his finger. So even though a judge has ordered him to pay child support, he doesn't. And there's nothing Mata Hari can do about this. Mata Hari made the mistake of allowing her daughter to go visit her father one day, and the father kidnapped her and never gave her back. And the courts ended up siding with the father and keeping Mata Hari from her daughter. Mata Hari will never see her daughter again. She never sees her daughter again. Now, a lot of people speculate that kind of her unraveling, and part of the reason why she was able to go into such an extreme industry was because she had given up kind of that hope to live. Because
nothing to lose.
She has nothing to lose. And I will say,
and very angry, probably, no doubt. Right. You know, when you're looking at this, I mean, when as women who've had children, we understand the protective nature we have over our children and our offspring, right?
Yeah.
and obviously gauging by what she becomes later and how she lives her life later, which we're obviously going to get into, she would have had enough. So she obviously had the intelligence already, right? So, I mean, it was already in her to understand certain things. Don't you agree?
Oh, yeah. She was
so
scrappy.
she had a little, yeah. She was so, I mean, if you think about that, the anger that builds up, your children get stolen. He's completely manipulated and abused you. He's already given your kids syphilis. How did they get syphilis? I don't even want to ask. I mean, was it through?
I'm sure she contracted it from him, is what I'm thinking, and then in the delivery.
Okay, then they would have been affected. Yeah.
That's what I.
So basically, she should never have had a natural birth. She should actually have given birth via a C-section. Yeah. Because obviously.
I mean, if anybody watching our viewers know more about how that's contracted to be, because I've never obviously.
It would be like that. I know that you know, if you as a woman, if you have any kind of sexual diseases going on there, God, it's what an awful topic. But anyway, I mean, it's true and very real. You can't give vaginal birth.
Right.
You then need to have a C-section, and it's got to be very, very closely monitored.
Yeah.
So it makes sense. I was thinking more in terms of he abused them himself.
That might be it too. That's a possibility as well. I mean, I was thinking that as well. Not only are you missing your child, you know, but if your ex-husband was like this great guy who was loving, at least you could rest peacefully at night knowing your child was being taken care of. But you have to know the horrors that she went through, being massively physically assaulted by him, and to know that your daughter is potentially going to experience that same anger. So he could have been preying on the kids as well. I don't know. I just assumed that it came through her through the birth process. That was just my assumption, but you know that could be too.
Well, clearly they weren't going to hang around for the long haul, right? They decided, hey, I'm out of here, you know, and they weren't going to be hanging out with daddy, that's for sure. So that's really sad.
And her son, who was 2 years old when he died, I mean, to lose a 2-year-old, I mean, I can't losing a child anyway, but a 2-year-old's a baby. And so he was buried in Indonesia. So the grave of her son is still in Indonesia. Her daughter, she can't get back. She goes to the court. It's not like, guys, she gave up. She was fighting the courts in the Netherlands to try to get her daughter back.
Like in the 1800s. I mean, this is like ridiculously long ago, right? Where women had absolutely no voice, actually.
And the fact that the judge had said, yes, the mother gets custody. Yes, father, you have to pay. That's on the court records. But again, the father's family, and he also had ties to Scotland. So his mother was Scottish, father was Dutch, very high aristocratic families. The fact that the father was so connected in with the aristocracy, he could control the puppet strings of the court. So it didn't matter that a judge had ruled that the mother has primary custody and that she should be given alimony and child support. It didn't matter. It meant nothing. It was just it meant as little as these notes on this notebook, right? It meant nothing. She couldn't do what you see. And I will say that's one thing the Russian miniseries did. They showed her everything she went through in the court system to try to get her child back. Like everything she went through. She started at first cleaning houses to try to make money to show that she was stable. I mean, we see that today in our court systems where parents have to provide that they're financially stable. But in our world today, women do have the right to get jobs. Like this is not, you know, this is the odds are stacked against her from the start. The odds are stacked against her. She has no education. You know, I keep going back to when she was in school to be a kindergarten teacher. If that headmaster had not groomed her and had not raped her, her life would have been totally different, right? She would have led a totally different life. And so we see that.
You know, I'm also just saying, I mean, I'm looking at this and I know Courtney speaking about current court situations, and I don't want to veer too much off the topic, but I want to just point out a parallel, because you can look at then and even now, you look at the court system, And if that court system is corrupt, and if that father has the power, and actually even mothers nowadays, because women have certainly gained more power since then and are using it also in not great ways. You know, we must never forget that two wrongs don't make a right either. You know, whatever it is, whatever we had to go through at that time to get to this point, we must appreciate the growth. That's the way I see it. But it's very interesting, you know, as you say, when this gets taken away, you get treated like you're nothing. Your children are stolen from you. You're beaten, you're abused, you're given some horrible sexual disease that infects your kids one way or the other. And they end up, after all of that, dying at the hands of their father, literally. You know, imagine the powerlessness as a woman you feel, and all you women out there and all you ladies who've got kids, you've got to know, I mean, it's like amazing when we look at this, how we would have felt, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I think about my son, especially when he was little. Shoo, no one was going to take him from me. I'll tell you that much. I was more ferocious than 10 lionesses, all wrapped into one, really. I mean, there was no way anyone was going to take my child.
Right. And I can't imagine, you know, for the daughter too, and she obviously, again, didn't live that long, but growing up thinking, I'm sure the father told her that her mother abandoned her. I'm sure there was so many, and the fact that these psychopaths can cause so much damage to so many people's lives. And I saw Miss Fiji here is from the Netherlands. So Miss Fiji, I will say there is a Mata Hari museum in Leeuwarden. I hope I'm saying that right, Leeuwarden, where she's from. So Miss Fiji, if you get a chance to go to that museum, let us know what you found in that, with a lot of her costuming and all the stuff that we're going to get into. Some of her letters are at that museum. That's not where her head was kept. Her head was kept in Paris, because we're going to get to that. She does move when all hope is lost. She moves to Paris. And Paris,
yeah, that was at the end when she lost her court case, right? When because after she lost her court case, well, she won maintenance, but then the ex refused to pay, so she then took the daughter back to him with no options really, and then moved to Paris to start a new life, as far as I remember.
In 1905, she moved to Paris. And Paris at this time was going through like a rebirth, like it's almost its own little renaissance. Again, this was when the Moulin Rouge was up and running, and there was this huge. I think you know, I often think of Paris as being like a hub for a lot of arts and stuff like that, design. And I think this is kind of where this started for Paris. We think about the Eiffel Tower was built around the late 19th century. So she goes there and hopes to start a new life, a new country, a new life. And Mata Hari was a very skilled equestrian. She was really skilled at equestrian, at horses. So the first thing, she doesn't jump right into stripping. I don't think many people do that end up in that. I have a lot of empathy and I you know, I know we make fun, it's culturally okay to make fun of strippers, but I often think a lot of these women and men who are doing this, you know, you have to kind of wonder what got them. Like, I don't think many people wake up one morning and decide to
most of them are sex trafficked. We know that. I mean, and when we're looking at I mean, I just know from some of these clubs here in Johannesburg, especially here as well, some of these Eastern Bloc girls that come here, their passports gets taken away.
Absolutely,
you know?
Absolutely.
They can't leave, basically. You know, they are trafficked here. So I would imagine that even then, if we're looking at the court system already, right?
Yeah. Everything's stacked against you. You're just a victim to the system.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I have been doing I'm trying to do deep dives actually into the Moulin Rouge. This story kind of inspired me, and I kind of been hitting some dead ends to really figure out like what was really going on at the Moulin Rouge, because that got me very interested. And there's probably more to this story. Such a famous burlesque club. There's probably more to this story. But so when she first got to Paris, she joined a circus to do these fancy like horse tricks. That was her first go-to, that she was going to join this circus and perform on a horse, no stripping. She went by the stage name as Lady McLeod, because remember, she still has that last name because was married to this Dutch officer, and the McLeod name, which is, his father was from Scotland, mother was from the Netherlands, very big Scottish aristocratic family. So she's Lady McLeod on this horse, which caused a huge issue with her ex-in-laws. And so she had to fight a lot of battles because they didn't want her using their name as a circus performer. So now you've got this, again, you've got the pressure coming from the aristocratic abusers that you're trying the best you can. It's like running uphill. It's like trying to run in water to just to be able to support yourself. You've lost everything. And this is what then pushes her into dancing. So she starts to perform Javanese, which is the Indonesian dance. She starts to do these dances. She starts now going by the name Matahari. She creates a whole backstory because she was very dark, right? So she had very dark hair, very olive skin, brown eyes. So she could kind of like fool people and make people believe that she was actually at least partially Indonesian. She wasn't, but this was her backstory. And one of the people and one of the reports I read said that she was really clever with the press. She was very clever with the press. She played a game with the press. She would give one journalist one backstory and one journalist another backstory, right? So she's playing with the press to create this mystique around her. At this point, she's, from what I understand of people who've watched her old footage of her, which is obviously not going to be that great. It's going to be very grainy and splotchy, and that she wasn't really a talented dancer. She obviously, it was very clear to a professional that she wasn't someone who really knew. She obviously had studied a little Javanese dancing, but it wasn't like she grew up with it, right? Like the story she was selling. So what started to happen is she started to realize that she could make more money if she started to take her clothes off while she danced. Now this became, she ended up attracting, because this was like hot and sexy for this time. Like I read in one report that she never took her top off, which seems weird to me because that would be the first thing I would, if I had to do that, I would not want to take my bottoms off. That feels more vulnerable to me. But apparently Matahari was very self-conscious about her breasts because apparently they weren't that big. I don't know. Who knows? But the fact that she was dropping her bottoms was very alluring for the men. And in a lot of these burlesque clubs, it wasn't like the average Joe was walking in. You had to have some money to come into these clubs. So she started to develop quite a little bank account for herself. She definitely started to make money. And somebody said a girl from small town transforms herself into a lady of the world, right? She started to travel all over Europe, performing constantly. Again, every journalist got a different story about who she was. But Paris became her main stage. That was like her home city now, Paris. But she was she was like she was the Madonna of her day. Very quickly, she became very, very famous. People knew who she was. She lived when she wasn't performing. She lived as a socialite. She was constantly partying. Again, I don't blame her. I don't blame if she was doing whatever drugs were the norm back then and drinking a lot. I don't blame her. She's been through so much trauma that she's as a human being is probably trying to do whatever she can do to get those memories out of her head, that pain out of her head. Her first act as Matahari was the 13th of March, 1905 at an art museum in Paris. And at that point, she became the founder's mistress. So this is, again, when she starts really collecting money. So not only is she getting paid a lot to perform, but now she's becoming mistresses to all these wealthy men who are keeping her, who are buying her the nicest clothes, the nicest apartments. Benefactors is what it was called. That's the fancy word of saying who these men were. They were her benefactors.
She was apparently really beautiful. Beautiful is in the eye of the beholder, yeah. But, and I mean, from what I see, she was beautiful, especially with that dark, as you say, Indonesian type complex, bringing in this alluring dance that she's now combining with dropping her bottoms.
Yep.
And getting all these guys titillated.
Yep.
And it's a well-known fact that she had incredible magnetism.
Yes.
She was very magnetic and knew how to attract any man that she certainly wanted. But she had an eye for the military boys.
Yes. Well, the thing is too, like, I don't know if I sent you guys any pictures of her before when she was married, but she looks very different when she was married to when she became, Mata Hari. She's very Victorian here. And then all of a sudden when she becomes Mata Hari, it's like her essence changes. And I think a lot, even with like Beyonce, Beyonce goes by the name, I'm paraphrasing, but she has said before when she goes on stage, she becomes Sasha Fierce. So it kind of almost made me think of like a split personality.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I don't know. I don't want to assume too much. I mean, again, she's lost everything. And so she's probably kind of like, fuck it at this point. Like, I'm just going to live and do what and
absolutely
play this dangerous
nothing
game.
to lose. Nothing to lose. She's already lost her kids. And as you say, such a, it's not like it was a tragic boat accident, right? I mean, the emotions and what she must have gone through around that must have been the thing that was probably what broke that camel's back, I would say. One day I had enough,
And maybe too, to have like another persona you play might also enable you to act in ways you wouldn't normally act. Like as Margareta Zell, she had to be this prim and proper Dutch lady, but as Mata Hari, she could play the part of the mysterious Indonesian Javanese stripper, right? And so, it's the psychology behind that's really fascinating.
The alter ego. But it's funny when you look at stuff, you just look at people in their work environment, right? Like, or their home environment or their average environment, where they can just be non-threatened or whatever, or not threatened, but just really be who they can be.
Yeah.
But then you often get the same people, like let's say go for a drink or party. Boy, you see a alter ego emerge out of there. I mean, people even name their alter egos, right?
Oh yeah, like Beyonce and Sasha Fierce, right? Yeah. Well,
absolutely.
It's that, and I know depression and trauma looks different on different people. Like the because I'm sure she had depression. I'm sure she had anxiety. I'm sure she had PTSD. I'm sure she had CPTSD, complex post-traumatic stress disorder. Like all these things we understand today, I'm sure she was dealing with. And people do react differently. We see police officers say this all the time. Like, you can't judge somebody by the way they react to something because everybody processes trauma differently. So it's just very, for our viewers, if you go do more research in this story, just really pay attention to her pictures from pre-Mata Hari to there is a switch. There is a difference in her energy and her eyes and the way she holds herself. It's unmistakable. And again, is that trauma? Is that the trauma coming out? I don't know. Is there something more devious here? Was there a disassociation that happened at some point from some other abuses that we're not aware of? I don't know.
Morné, won't you just put that picture up again, if you don't mind, the one you've just had up? Wow, look at her eyes.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a complete, that I would definitely say it's a switch in personality. I mean, as you say, the previous picture, Morné, if you wouldn't mind just showing that one again. I mean, look at her. She looks like her great grandmother.
Yeah.
She's completely conformed to whatever that old dude wants her to be. Oh, he's so disgusting.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, okay, tricky vibes there.
And she looks 65 there. Don't tell me that poor girl was 18. She looks like she's 65. And look at that. Yeah. Wow.
It's so funny you mentioned the eyes, because when that other picture with her kind of staring at the camera, I thought even though her body has her eyes almost look dead a little bit, but
it's that absolute, when we look at these things, and I mean, it's been so interesting the last few years listening to people who've been split or fragmented, whatever the term is. I know there's conflict around that, so I don't mean to offend anyone. But, You know, there's really, it's different energies or different entities that in that moment will be the lusty one or the sex kitten or whatever it might be. And of course, she would have taken on, to me, I would absolutely say, from what we're seeing from the beginning to what she became, there's definitely been a flick in that switch. I would definitely say there's an alter ego.
That's
that
when I was researching and looking at the pictures, I was like, holy shit, these look like two. You're right. When she was 18, she looked older than she did leading up to her death at 41. When she was in her 20s and 30s, she looked a lot younger. There's definitely a huge switch in the you know, these are old pictures, black and white pictures. Someone could blame it on that, but no, you can tell as a human being, you can see through a picture.
I mean, you look at the whole picture. You see the way she's standing and her demeanor. You know, she's like, and just look at the shape of her, not that one, the wedding dress. Look at the shape of her wedding dress. It's like she's boxed in, right? You can just see everything about that picture is telling you she's boxed in. There she's being controlled. She's doing something because she has to do it. She's, you know, it's she has no option here. That's what I'm feeling like, you know. And then we see the next one. I mean, look at that. It's like, screw you, Jack. Try me now. You know, it's very interesting to watch the switch in the energies there.
It's
that's delivering.
Yeah, I keep getting the word devolution in my head. Like, it's almost she's like she's spiraling in a very different way than when we normally think of devolution, you know, where she's really just kind of becoming another person because she can't handle. And I don't blame her. I have no judgment.
If you but if you think about what she went through, right? A husband who had, I don't know how many concubines and gives her syphilis that ultimately kill her kids, right? So she's going to become the opposite of that. So she's going to weaponize that sexuality against him and men, actually, because now remember, think about that, men have been her oppressors and men have been her abusers. So now she's going to bring out the ultimate weapon that is the sex goddess, whatever it was, and she's going to screw them over even worse than what they screwed her over. And, you know, let's face facts. Most men, and I think especially in those days as well, most certainly had, I mean, they were easily seduced by women like that. I mean, those women were not like today. All you got to do is turn on your Instagram and you can just like have your pick of the moment, right?
No. They don't make them like they did back then.
No, but what I'm saying is, you just open your Instagram and all you see is bum cheeks and boobs, right? So I mean, then in those days that was not very common. So to have a woman like that come out there, boy, and have a look at you like that, as a guy, I can imagine. I mean, he melted. She had that complete, and that's what I would say. What Jesse and Caleb and all the survivors that we talk about the sex magic, because that sex magic is that allure, that enchantment, right? That because she's an absolute enchantrix there. Please show me that picture again. I just find this so fascinating.
I wrote sex magic here. I wanted to say it as well. It's like complete sex magic here.
Yeah. And show another picture. Like look at her eyes, the way she's sitting. Everything about that picture is like, oh yeah, come here, you know. Let me show you. Yeah. So.
And and guys, again, I just want to reiterate how famous she was. She was like Madonna. She had people, you know, whatever the paparazzi was back then, whatever that looked like, following her constantly. She worked her way up to the top of this quote unquote entertainment industry that she was in. And you know, and I keep hearing the Janis Joplin song, Bobby McGee, freedom's just another word for nothing left to lose. She literally had nothing left to lose. And that gave her a sense of freedom to lean into that sex magic, to lean into that, because she couldn't get her daughter back. It was done, you know, she'd hit rock bottom. So if we're going to be at rock bottom, let's be at rock bottom, and let's at least make a lot of money so our benefactors can buy us drugs and alcohol so we can forget our pain. And let's use the one asset she had that no one could take away from her was her sexuality, right? That's
And
it.
I'm liking, Jessica, what you're saying here, and I agree with that, because over the years I've worked with many people that have been sexually abused. And I'm just going to put your comment up. As a victim of abuse myself, I can confirm that we are not even close to the same people we were after the abuse, even with therapy. And I fully agree. It's like what, and the way, you know, I read energy when I'm working with my clients. It's like once something like that has happened, literally the shape of the cell changes. That's all I can say in my way of reading it. Okay, everyone's going to read this differently. So if you think about a fat, round, healthy cell, and as we know, the cell duplicates itself and makes more of itself. So whatever the mother cell is what it's going to duplicate more of, right? And if that core mother cell is distorted, hurt, abused, broken, shattered, it duplicates more of that. And it's true. But I want to say that it is possible to go back to that beautiful original space. And I don't mean to say that to undermine it, and it's never going to take that away. But I've worked with people, and what we do is we just bring in God's understanding, and we receive the gift that experience brings you, and that's the gift you take into the world with you. So if that gift would be then to work with other women that have been abused, or children, because your experience is what it is and has been what it's been, you've healed through it, you've healed the trauma. It doesn't change what happened, but you can now take that gift of healing that experience to those who need it. That's
Absolutely.
how a healer works. That's the true healers of the world, when we learn through our own experience.
And unfortunately, Mata Hari was literally in a den of vipers. I mean, bless her heart. I have so much empathy for this woman. Like when I was looking at her story, I just felt nothing but just compassion and pain for her. And what we also have to remember at this time too, guys, we're leading up to World War I, which is, so there's obviously, I mean, look what's happening to us right now in our world, and all the whispers and the, you know, looking over your shoulder. So this is happening in the backstory, and this is World War I is what ends up being her demise. And so she has a liking for military men. She ends up
authority, right? That authority figure that she never had as a child. And that's evident when you see who she married, because she was missing that structure. She was missing, and that's why it's so important to give kids routines, guys, and structure.
Because if you spoil them, because her father was, before he was buying all this, there were other pictures I didn't send to you guys of her as a kid, the elaborate stuff. So she then interprets that authority and that spending money as love, right? And so there's probably a subconscious side of her, even though she's like, fuck it all, I've lost everything, using these men to try to fulfill a love within her.
But it's also, look, if her father just spent money on everything, right, then she will marry someone who's so controlling and spends money on nothing. He will always going to have the financial structure. So she would subconsciously be going for that, right?
And
when you look at the military
back to these men that are elaborate. Well, so guys, her last performance was on the 13th of March, 1915. This was because World War II started in 1914. So she ended up performing into the first year of World War I. Sorry, not World War II. But because of the war, she could not perform as a courtesan anymore. She had to just rely on being people's mistresses. So now the thing about Mata Hari is because she was from the Netherlands, the Netherlands stayed neutral in World War I. So she was one of the only performers who could still continue to travel to her men between France and Spain and Germany and all these places. So this is also what's going to lead to the allegations that she's going to face about being a double agent in espionage. In the meantime, she ends up falling in love with a 23-year-old Russian pilot. Now, this guy's obviously a lot younger than her, by the name of Captain Maslov. And he's serving with the French, and that's how it was written that he was the love of her life. Now, there was an extremist military group in France that was rising at this time. So that's also happening. So he ends up in 1960, Maslov was shot and wounded in the left eye. So he's now hospitalized. And this is where they start to wager with her because she wants to see this boy, this child that she's in love with. And so the legend goes, and again, guys, all of these papers were released just a few years ago. And so this is kind of folklore-ish, that this military-esque extremist police force that was rising at France this time said that she could only see this man if she agreed to spy for France, which is actually quite clever to use a courtesan, because they're, at this point, they're these ditzy women who are just there to, make a man happy, and these men in the pillows can tell them stuff. These military officials, they know that she's got a lot of benefactors who are top military officials on both sides of the war, right? So she was tasked at dancing for and seducing Kaiser Wilhelm II, the son of the Crown Prince Wilhelm. They believed she could get information from Germany to bring back to France. Captain Latte was her contact and later her accuser. She was accused of being a double agent. She was a German spy with the code name H12. Now, they found all of these in England. They found all of these transmissions between these double agent spies, and they thought that she must have been this code name H12. Now, again, you guys, if you go back and read the release documents, none of this shit's true. Like, this is what they were telling the public. They were building up. We know that they do that. They build up a consciousness, a collective consciousness around a person. All right. So they decided it was Monahari. She was arrested on the 13th of February, 1917, in her room at the Hotel Elise Palace in Paris. She was tried on the 24th of February, accused her of being the cause of 50,000 deaths of soldiers because of the information that she had leaked as a double agent. France was on the verge of collapsing at this point because of World War II, and she again became the scapegoat. This time not just for one or two people, but for a whole freaking nation. It was all this woman's fault. She became the scapegoat. So I have a quote from her here. She said, "My international connections are due to my work as a dancer, nothing else. Because I really did not spy. It's terrible that I cannot defend myself." Her attorney faced many challenges. He was denied permission to cross-examine the prosecutor's witnesses. She was described in open court as a femme fatale. She never admitted it. So, and when you look at what they released in, I think it was 2017 or something, they released all of the court records. They literally made this shit up. They used her as they took, and guys, think about what they still do this. They took the nation through newspapers, and put all the French's nation's attention on this woman, this burlesque dancer. Now she's a dirty stripper. This horrible femme fatale woman is the reason why 50,000 French soldiers died. She's the reason why France is about to collapse. So they distract. So it's what are they doing over here? Using her again as the scapegoat for what was an
psyop, the psyop, as we would call it, would call it today.
And her attorney couldn't cross-examine. Her attorney filed complaints with the court that it was not a fair trial. Once again, this woman is being screwed over by the court system. It's wild. So she was executed just before dawn on the 15th of October, 1917. She was only 41 years old. So that's a year older than I am now, basically my age. She was not bound nor blindfolded. And I love this part of the story. I think this is just the best, and good for you, Matahari. Before, they had 12 gunmen that were facing her to shoot her. Before they fired, she blew them all a kiss. And I just think that's so sassy, and I just applaud her for being that brave and being that, and just blew them all a kiss before they opened fire on her. So there was one bullet to the head. After they shot her, they put one bullet in the head to make sure she was dead. No one claimed her body. So no one came forward to claim her body. Her daughter, I think, ended up dying 2 years later. Body was used for medical study. Head was embalmed and kept at the Museum of Anatomy in Paris. In 2000, the year 2000, 23 years ago, our timeline, our time, they discovered her head was missing. So that is what's really fascinating. It makes that, when I saw that, that is what made me really believe there's more to the story about Matahari's life than we've been privy to. And a lot of what we're looking at with just the evidence we have, I think definitely shows a lot of, and I know, as my boyfriend was saying, a lot of people, they watch people, right? These groups, the controllers watch people. And there could have been something very special about this woman, a very mystical element to her. There's people that are born with, and I don't know, maybe that's why they wanted her head. I don't, Anyway, but yes, on 2017, I have it right here. 1,275 pages were declassified by France, again, in 2017, which basically 100 years later, it's like, oh no, she wasn't a spy. Sorry, guys, she wasn't a spy. We just sacrificed her, basically. She wasn't a spy, though.
It's so crazy that, right? Because to me, when we also go through this thing, it really does seem obvious that from her birth, really, maybe not from the birth per se, right? But we know what's been going on since forever. And it's like she was born at round about the same time, which is very interesting. If you guys watched Caleb Jade's interview yesterday, especially, guys, go watch it. The Truth About the Cabbage Patch Kids, right? Which was what we've been doing in our Tartaria stuff as well, talking about these babies that just appeared at the turn of the century. And this is the same timeline, right? So, where did they go? What did they do? So when you're reading that stuff, and you're hearing that stuff, these guys were up to shit, up their highly advanced shit, right? So they were already doing crazy stuff like this. So it makes perfect sense to me that she was probably taken into the system, right?
Yeah. She was an easy pawn to take in.
Yes, absolutely. And then groomed by this dude. Because it sounds like he certainly had, if he was a high-ranking military officer, he would have definitely climbed the ladder there somehow, right? We know by now the military system in many ways is Luciferian and is built on a Luciferian template, right? So no doubt with that kind of behavior, he would have thought he was on his way to being God. So no doubt that would have affected her. And, that switch, it's like they did what they did to make her crazy.
Yeah.
And they certainly succeeded, because I think that was really her crazy switch going, boom, no more. Let me go and do something and I'll become the opposite of whatever I was. And do I think that she was selling secrets? Probably. I mean, in my intuition, I would say probably. Yes. She knew she had the power. I mean, we aren't talking, hang on, let's analyze this. Take emotion out of it, right? Let's take emotion out of it. We must remember that she was living a life that is foreign to you and I. Yeah. Now, when you are this kind of dancer or performer or artist in that day and age, right, you getting a lot of attention. You right in there with the shark pit. You've got to know your wits about you. You in the war. These guys are cutthroat. you've got to kind of do what you're doing. So she knew what she had to do. And when you're looking at the pictures of her being that little vamp, that ain't no innocent little vamp in there. Let's think about that, right? She might have been innocent before that, but now remember, she's probably experiencing her equal opposite here, or her dark or shadow aspect of that abuse. So she will now go out and deceive, because that's what women in their shadow polarity do. We manipulate and we deceive and we do all sorts of things, and we can put this beautiful smile on our face and go, come darling, spend the night with me. You know, it's true when you look at all these great seductresses. So do I think that she's innocent? No, probably not. Do I think that it's okay the way what they did to her? No, absolutely not. You know, but I do think what probably pissed them off is that she was able to seduce so many of them.
She had a power over them.
And they didn't even see it, right? So now they were like really annoyed.
They're like,
so they decided to give it to her. What? She spied for you, she spied for you, she spied for you. And we thought we were stupid, bloody hell.
We thought we were her special, her only special little boyfriend.
I thought I was the only one that gave her diamonds and glitz.
And this guy's over here giving her furs, and this guy's over here buying her apartment. I mean, the girl worked hard, man. Like she did what she wanted to do. You know,
I'm not saying she wasn't or she was, but I would certainly, I would lay my money if I was a betting gal. I'd lay my money on the fact that she probably did. I'm not saying exactly in the way that they said she did it. I'm sure those charges were probably spiced up a bit.
Yeah.
But I think that
quickly, because I want to explain this to people. So the story goes that she was asked by the French to spy for the French, but then she ended up going to Germany and telling the Germans what the French were doing. So that's what got her executed, guys. I don't know if I clarified that she actually was charged with espionage, which is actually like a double agent. So she was supposed to go to Germany, collect information from the military men of Germany, bring it back to the officials of France. But they claim that she took French information and instead took it to the Germans. So I want to clarify that. I don't know if I clarified that. She wasn't killed for just saying military secret. She was killed because she turned her back on what was presumably her, even though she was still Dutch. She wasn't French, she was Dutch, but she'd been living in France for such a long time that she was kind of considered them, right?
Yeah.
And they used her because she had a Dutch passport. They used her because she could still travel, because the Netherlands were technically neutral in this part of the war. So it just and they dangled her boyfriend over her head. Well, and last time the court system took her daughter from her, so she was willing to do anything she could to see the love of her life again. There is a delegation called the Matahari Foundation that is trying to get her exonerated. There's also, in my research, I actually found quite a few nonprofits to this day in America and other countries that take her name, the Matahari, and they're foundations for abused women. Now, I'm not saying, I don't know, some of them could be good, some of them could be bad, but I thought that was interesting that some people had taken her name and named their foundation after her to honor abused women. Because at the end of the day, that's what she was abused, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's what happened. And I would think too, I was thinking about that as well, like the day she was executed leading up, I often think about that, because I think I've been executed in past lives before. I think a lot of us have gone down that road, but I think about like, what would be your final thoughts like before that came? And for her, I'm like, maybe there was a sense of peace, like it was finally over, you know?
I think that's so true. You hear stories about guys on death row that, the minute that they'll fight it, and literally maybe the last week or couple of hours or day, maybe, it's well known it's like they had complete peace.
Yeah.
They've met God, they've made their peace with God. They're ready to go. This is what I hear a lot. I hear that a lot. So it's almost like at the end, you kind of surrender to the fight. It's like, okay, I'm exiting the planet now. I'm exiting. I'm out of here. See ya in the next life.
Yeah. Yep. Oh, I feel sorry for you guys when she comes back. She's gonna come back and be like, "Where the fuck's my head?"
Give me back my head.
Head. Can you imagine if somebody showed up at the Paris Museum today, like, "I'm sorry, give me my head back," you know, like I don't know. Either they would think she was crazy, this person was crazy, or they'd be like, "Oh shit." Oh no.
Totally.
So, but and that's was the, that's what, again, the missing head part was really when I said something to my boyfriend, and he mentioned something about the occult practices. With there's a lot of occult practices that involve skulls and heads, and he was like, "Oh, they do that." So there's obviously more to this story. The fact that her head is missing, there's obviously more. And using her body for medical study, okay, but then to take her head off and embalm it, like, if a person says they want their body to be used for medical, for scientific study, I don't know of many places that decapitate the head. Usually it's the whole cadaver. They use it in medical schools, cadavers. And but for
It's
her,
so, yeah, but I think it's so crazy. It's like what you're saying is that, there's so many stories of people that don't have their heads, like their heads were just removed. Let's just say removed. Gosh, it sounds so gross. But, and think about those ancient times as well, people being beheaded.
oh yeah,
People hanging from the neck,
yeah,
right? So there's something about that neck head. I mean, I don't want to talk about this disgusting story I saw this morning about the aborted babies and what they're using their skulls for. I mean, it's just absolutely horrific. So the thing with heads, skulls, and yeah, Courtney, you were talking earlier on, it's about really the pineal gland, but also, it really, I mean, every part of the body means something as well, right? It's the brain, it's the home of the brain, which is the computer, the body's computer. So many of these people, when you like cannibalism, if you consume the brain, you're
yeah,
literally taking on that person's consciousness. So if that's what you want to be doing, that's part of a ritual, a sacrifice as well.
yeah.
So I mean, this is speculation, but and please, no one go and say this is what we're now putting out there. I'm not. We're just kind of speculating with the information that we know, and knowing full well that these people were up to their shenanigans, very much up to their shenanigans at that time of this, those dates as well.
Early 20th century,
It's not like the Lucys weren't having fun with human beings yet. They certainly were.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm getting this picture of trophy hunters as well, where we have the heads of all the antelope and all the lions and everything.
Yeah.
It's like there's a fascination about.
Yeah, why not put
heads.
the paw? Why not put the claw or a paw?
Right.
Or,
Yes, the
why?
head always.
Like,
Wow.
and I know the whole body is an essence of a person, but the face, the head, that's really the essence of where the crux of everything is. For the eyes, you really can tell a lot about a human being's state of mind when you look into their eyes. Even if their body is saying one thing, their eyes and their facial expression could be saying another. And I know a lot of people who study body language said that you can tell a lot about the stories people tell by the way they move their eyes when they're talking. So there's a lot of truth in the facial expressions.
It's like what Courtney's talking about, beheading babies in Gaza at the moment. I know that's true as well. Wow, crazy. This is just insane.
It's kind of interesting to go back and and Monahari there is a lot of like cult. I say that loosely, like in our contemporary society, people are fascinated by this woman because she's a fascinating story. There's it's like the Moulin Rouge, just these crazy stories, but I don't think people really realize that there's probably more to the story than we're privy to. And so I just it's, and if Miss Fiji, if you're still in there, if you're in the Netherlands, girl, if you go to her museum, which is in Leeuwarden, where she's from, I'd love to hear what you see at her museum, like their clothing that they still have of hers, because clothing too, you guys, clothing, it carries the essence of have you ever, like, for example, like a shirt you have that every time you wear it, something bad happens. It's because something bad happened at one point you wore it and you emitted an energy into the clothing.
Absolutely.
And so, you know, so you think her clothing is also holding energy and essences, especially her, you know, costumes that she wore for 10 years straight on those dance floors at those theaters, that there's an essence there. Her letters
Well,
are
if
there.
she's technically the first stripper or the first lure into the arts of luring and the sex magic, then obviously she's must be like a little trophy for the industry in the sense that she pioneered the way forward for this new kind of magic
It's
to
interesting though, because
seduce.
one would think that she would have been groomed by those programs, right? But maybe like the whole Peter Kitty or Monarch or whatever it was weren't around then. I don't think those particular grooming programs were probably around then. I mean, who knows? If anyone knows about that, let us know.
Might have been like the first guinea pig, because we're looking at building up to like the creation of the 3-letter agency that's coming in the next
You're probably right. It could well have been a test program, and it backfired on them.
They're like,
Right.
I love
"Hey, uh-oh."
This one blew. What do you call it when something blows? Come on, a fuse.
fuse.
I mean, like think about it, because from 1917 and the next coming a few decades later, they create the 3-letter agency. They create the MK Ultra programming. Then you got World War II with Operation Paperclip, and so she could have very well been. They could have seen this chick and been like, "Oh, she got no family. She's already traumatized. Let's keep going. Let's see what happens."
But actually, you know, that to me would have happened when she got married then.
Yeah,
to
maybe.
the German dude, because that to me was her grooming. And
or
you know,
the headmaster might have been a start too.
I was going to say that's exactly. And before that, she had trauma at school, so she would have been identified at school already. If she was accused of having sex with a headmaster, in my opinion, I don't think her parents would have groomed her. That to me doesn't feel right. I think he was just wayward. And obviously didn't do what he needed to do properly as a father. He wasn't being a father who was in control of the home. And that's how people get in. The minute that parental unit is broken, that's when these leeches will find their way in. And that to me makes sense, because then at school she would have been groomed sexually. And then by the headmaster of all things as well. So she would have known already from that age, like, you know, often kids that have been groomed that way, they taught very early how to please a man. Young children are taught very early.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you know what's interesting, because I think it was Courtney that mentioned in the comments that courtesans were some of the most highly educated women at that time. And we know she was in school to be a kindergarten teacher, so she probably was very, very smart. There was probably she's probably a very intelligent woman. And I think with intelligence, if you can get in there early enough, you can start to use that to your advantage, right? To that complex of thought. You know, usually with high intelligence comes complexity of thought. And that can be used a lot if you know how to mold it. I mean, look how many people have PhDs who are totally brainwashed into what they want them to think. So that could have been part of it too. She could have actually been a very intelligent woman, especially for that time, right?
Well, absolutely, definitely, and that's how they would have identified her, even at school, right?
Yeah.
So she and we look at all these kids in the system. The one that gets specifically chosen, they are super smart, and they've all got some sort of a gift, right? So it would seem to me that she was certainly groomed.
Yeah.
And her kids were probably sacrifices.
Oh,
if you look at it in that way, or at least the one would have been.
And
probably
she could have been bloodline. I don't know anything about her family, but there's a possibility that she could have actually been a bloodline. I don't know. Like, who knows? You know, there's not a whole lot of information about her ancestors. She did have a couple of brothers. too. I want to point that out as well. So she did have a couple of brothers who ended up leading a very different life than her and had no contact with her. Again, didn't even claim her body when she was executed. And I would be interested to know if those brothers ended up having children of their own and their children's children, and if maybe they're connected today. I don't know if anybody from the Netherlands knows what happens. I know this story is bigger there than it is here in the United States. Who that family is today. Actually, interestingly enough, let me look at the way it's spelled because we have, oh, that's interesting. Yeah. So Zelle, and some people say Zell, I wrote here, some people could pronounce it as Zella, but we have a banking option on our phones through Chase, through other Bank of America, where you can Zelle or Zelly, spelled the same way, money and pay. So that's interesting. I don't know. That might just be a coincidence, but yeah. So I don't know. I would love to see if you guys ask Jessie like her thoughts on Matahari and what she sees with this story.
Yeah, very interesting. Wow. Okie dokie, very interesting chat today, little Brice. Nice to have you back so we can natter around on a Monday. And yeah, so good to see everyone in the chat as well. Yeah, I like what you said, Amy. She's smiling on you for bringing this to us.
I got me a little emotional. I just noticed that. Thank you, Amy. I had never heard of her before too, until I stumbled upon her. I don't think we get a lot of stories about her here in America. And I just was very emotionally, this story, when I started doing the research on her, this really affected me, this story, just because I think a lot of women could have been caught in this situation. And I just, as a woman myself, I just felt so just hopeless for her and just, wanted to hug her. And, even with these people who are in the club, who are born into these clubs, like they're still humans, right? And some of them, thank God for the ones that have souls, because they're the ones that are the whistleblowers, and, to respect the trauma that they've been through, and to see that that's a human being, and to put yourself in their shoes, So anyway, so yeah, thanks for that. The chat's popping today. You guys are awesome. I can't wait to see, for people who watch the replay, to see like their thoughts on the matter and what other comments we get from people watching this and what they noticed too. So we're all just Nancy Drew in this shit together. The controller's got nothing on us.
Yeah.
That's why we're shadow banned. That's why we get shadow banned.
Exactly.
Let's just blow the controllers a kiss and say shadow ban us. Sorry.
Love it. Okay, wow. Thank you, Brice. Thank you, Morné. And thank you to everybody in our little chat room. Really cool to see you all. It's really enjoyable that you guys are here, and I'm just trying to catch a glimpse of the chats as well, because although I try and keep an eye on them while we're chatting, I do tend to miss some from time to time. It's really good to have you here. Enjoy all your comments, and look forward to seeing you back on Wednesday again, Brice, on Solutions. And we're nearing now eventually. I mean, I think we've been doing the Sophia Coach for about a year now.
I think we're at White Buffalo Woman now, aren't we? White Buffalo.
Yeah, we're coming. We're nearing the end now, but we've missed a few weeks as well. So look forward to seeing you guys on Wednesday at Solutions with Aquarius Rising Africa. Okay, guys. God bless you all. Take good care. Don't forget to blow everyone kisses.
Yes.
Yeah.
Make love, not war.
Yeah, channel your inner Matahari. Just channel your inner Matahari.
There you go. There you go. And honestly, whatever it was, whether I don't think it was all what they said. I think some of it was maybe she was duped.
Yeah.
That's also a feeling that comes to me, is that she was probably duped with some of the stuff.
She was scapegoated
as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And no, not all is what it seems. So bless her. Thank her for coming to be our topic of conversation for today. It's always wonderful to bring up interesting woman in history. And let's hope that we'll get to the bottom of this one before we say goodbye to the Earth plane, whenever that might be. Right? Okay. Cheers, guys. God bless you all. See you soon. Take care.